We are here to protect and enrich our client and have long-term success for them, not you primarily. So some buyers are egomaniacs and they're very repulsed by those comments. Others look at it and go, I'm getting a well-prepared seller. I'm understanding what I'm buying. So what if I pay an extra 10 or 15 or $20 million? The chances of my success have gone through the roof.
Peter Kubasek isn't just another banker. He's the man billion-dollar buyers try to shut down because he fights to put every last dollar into his clients' pockets.
What I recalled was looking at my dad's deal, and who was on my dad's side of the table were good people, but they weren't experts. So it really seared into my consciousness when I started thinking and mulling over the concept of starting my own investment bank that I could help take care of people like my dad.
This is the untold side of big money deals, where power, faith, and grit decide who survives.
I don't lift them up because I'm powerful. I lift them up because the king wants them lifted up.
Peter Kubasek. You've done over 500 M&A transactions in your career, from tens of millions to billions of dollars. But it started with one when you were growing up. Your father sold his business. I'd love to learn that story and how that impacted you and how that led to what you're doing today with Arc Malibu.
Thank you. My dad, Michael Paul Kubasek, was born in 1930 in a coal mining town on the border of British Columbia and Alberta in the Crow's Nest Pass. And his father died in 1936. He was a miner in a coal mine, and it collapsed. And he was a big mountain of a man. He was able to extricate himself, but got blood poisoning and died. So my dad, to say the least, lived a hard scrabble life. Everything you've seen negative in a movie about the Depression and coal mining towns is accurate. So my dad grew up with trust issues. He had a photographic memory, and he had two business partners. My dad was a really good father. He died February 24th of this year. It was time for him to go. His body was worn out. He was 95 years old. Photographic memory. And he would get up around 4 in the morning and go to work. He'd come home every single day at 5 o'clock. He'd have dinner with us, and then he'd go back to work after we were settled. Work till 11, and then be up the next day at 4 a.m. doing it again. His partners, when he left, had to replace him with 3 people. So what my dad experienced was what many people experience when they sell their businesses. He had advisors that were very smart. They cared. They were gifted, but they weren't M&A advisors. They weren't CPAs or investment bankers or lawyers that had a ton of mergers and acquisitions experience. So his 2 advisors cared and wanted to help, but when you look back at his deal, it was a terrible deal. And as I started working in consulting for Arthur Andersen and then in mergers and acquisitions and strategy at Nestle, what I recalled was looking at my dad's deal and who was on his side of the table and who was on my side of the table at Nestle. Lazard Frere, Goldman Sachs, Bain, Wilkie Polk, Aiken and Gump, the best of the best. And who was on my dad's side of the table were good people, but they weren't experts. So it really seared into my consciousness when I started thinking and mulling over the concept of starting my own investment bank that I could help take care of people like my dad and my family because they were not prepared. And they had good people, but they weren't the right people.
And when you break that down and you talk about your dad's deal that he got, were there specific angles? Was there a right? Because people see the headline X partners up with Y for Z amount, and it's the headline. But on the sell side, in terms of your father's deal, were there any lasting impacts or repercussions that stuck with you from your time with that?
Yeah. So the simplicity, Ivan and DJ, that if my dad had slowed down and listened and realized that there were other ways for him to approach the exit around culture and his values, beliefs, and habits, and how his lasting legacy could be changed for the positive with some tweaks to how he went about exiting his business. So culture, preparation, listening, adhering, taking advice, preparation. We'll talk about preparation throughout our time together. If you become prepared, the chances that you fail go down dramatically. You guys sent me some great questions to help me prepare. You did research. You read. You listened to other podcasts. Those are things that a lot of people, as they're exiting, don't necessarily do.
When it comes to what business owners should prepare for in selling their business, in your experience, what are those things that they should prepare for? I know there's a lot.
Yeah. If all they did was 4 things, if they prepared and understood and were able to communicate their culture, their values, their beliefs, and their habits. Values are what you get fired for around here. Beliefs are the key things that drive you, but you're not going to get fired if you don't wear a really cool shirt. And then habits, it's showing up on time. It's being prepared. It's always praying before a meal. It's the little things. So if they understand their culture and are able to explain their culture, the chances that they're going to have success goes through the roof. Because the number one reason deals fail to accrete value to the buyer is because there's a cultural mismatch. And if you can communicate to the buying marketplace ahead of time how there's not a cultural mismatch, that you're communicating what your culture is and they're communicating back what their culture is, then the buyers can pay more because there's a lower risk of failing. The next thing is their operations. If you take time to do an honest review with smart people in your circle of your company, just asking simple questions. What are our constraints? What are we doing right? What maybe should we change? How effective have we been? What are our competitors doing that we're not doing? Are our competitors gaining market share? Are we gaining market share? So operations, then our marketing, our go-to-market. If we take the time to understand where we've been successful, what markets we've been successful, and where we haven't been successful, what should we change? Should we change our pricing? And then finally, our financials. Understanding and having KPIs. Understanding and preparing and making sure we understand in our industry what we should be measuring. And understanding is 3% profit in distribution, okay. And in other markets and service companies, if it's not 50%, they feel they're failing. So it's taking the time to understand those bedrocks. And if you understand them and can explain them, then you're going to have a better chance. So what we've said for 3 decades, operate every day as if you're going to be exiting. So that doesn't mean you should always have a short-term view of not making capital investments, because you're not going to gain the upside of making $1 million investment today. But it's taking the time to understand, are we in good shape? Do we have a succession plan? Who is going to be the next leader? I was on the phone with a brilliant operator this morning, and he taught me more in an hour than I've learned in quite a time, because he understood his space and he understood everything he needed to be doing to grow his business. When he started it was next to nothing, and now it's $1 billion. And he was talking to me about the economic impacts and why certain things were not impacting him and others were. He was talking to me about Mexican happenings, and that he has friends and relationships there. So it's not theoretical in Wall Street Journal or the Monterey Times that he's learning it from. It's on the ground people. So when we start our businesses, we're really excited and we ask for help. And then we get more successful and we don't think we need help anymore. And we stop asking and we stop applying. And that's trouble.
So you mentioned the 4 pillars and kind of the foundations. What are some things that in your dad's sale of his business that were not there, maybe on the cultural side, on the operations side, the finances side, that weren't there? And then what are some differences in, after seeing 500 plus transactions and selling $1 billion companies, what are some differences in the successful transactions you've seen versus the original mistakes your dad made?
Yeah. So my dad did not have a foundation of trust with his partners. And instead of seeking an arbitrator or someone that could help bridge the gap and shine light onto the situation, he just threw up his hands. And where I see really successful transactions, DJ, I see where they are open to feedback, they are seeking feedback, and they're applying feedback. So culture would be the biggest thing that my dad was missing. His business was well run. It was very profitable. They were growing. So most of the 4 boxes were in place, except there wasn't a cultural foundation. There wasn't the trust. And I think of Morse Technologies, which when we were introduced to Morse Technologies 15 plus years ago, I looked at it from the outside as a job shop, not something I wanted anything to do with. But I had probably 6 people say to me, you need to talk to the guys at Morse Technologies. And one of them, a good friend, Lloyd Fields, said to me, "Don't do me a favor." So he did the brilliant thing, which is threw it back in my court and challenged me. And when I met with Greg and Eli and Wendell and all the folks there, Bill, what I heard and what I began to understand was these guys were smarter than almost anyone I'd ever interacted with. And they were doing something that I had done one deal in my life and barely understood it even after I had done the deal, which was 3D printing additive manufacturing. And the deal I had done was 3D printing in plastic and polymers. And they were doing 3D printing in titanium and other alloys. The machines that they did the work on, EOS, was out of Germany. And they knew more about the machines and how to tweak them and produce excellence than the manufacturers of the machines did. So because we were dealing with some really significant players that were interested in partnering with Morse, we hired a former CIA operative who did a ton of research. And she came back to us and said, "I've interviewed who are considered to be the smartest people around 3D printing additive manufacturing in the world. And the two names that come up over and over that are maybe the smartest are Greg Morris and Eli Lichty. And those are two of the four partners. So Peter, do everything you can to ensure that this finds the perfect home, because this is world-changing technology." So to answer your question, DJ, they had culture that drove them crazy because they're almost all engineers. When I would talk about culture, they lived culture, they taught culture, but they didn't have a culture statement that they weren't touchy-feely. They weren't getting their master's in operational development, OD, but they lived culture. And they were curious. So the Rupert family, who are some of the richest folks in South Africa and Switzerland, were really interested in partnering with Morris because the Ruperts did research just like we did research, and they realized these guys were the smartest guys going. Now, it's hard for any of us on this show today to really imagine what it was like when no one knew what 3D printing additive manufacturing was. Because you fast forward the 13 years since that deal closed, General Electric has publicly stated that their additive investment has netted them $1 billion a year in savings. So it didn't matter what they paid collectively for their additive manufacturing divisions because they were throwing off so much money. But the reason that was the foundation of buying right to begin with, which was Morris Technologies and RQM, and keeping the brilliant people. So big differences between my dad's and Morris Technologies.
And when you break that down, it's you kind of answered my follow-up question. You answered my follow-up question while you answered it. It was because you are on the sell side, and you did explain earlier that on the buy side, you have guys like Goldman Sachs, you have all these heavy hitters, you have the big brand names, the biggest town in the world. But on the sell side, representing the business owners, they may not have the same level of representation oftentimes. And a question I had going into today was, what benefit does it provide the buyer that the seller is most prepared, rather than just trying to optimize the transaction purely like, I have the advantage, I have the resources, I know that this deal it's not necessarily as much of a win-win as possible. Why is it a win for the buyer that the transaction between the buyer and the seller is as much of a win-win as possible?
So, very good question, Ivan. There are some buyers that sit across the table from us and threaten us and say, you are making this so difficult. You are driving so much of our synergistic value into your client's pocketbook that if you don't stop, we're never going to do a deal with you again. And we say to them, we didn't plan to do another deal with you again. We are here to protect and enrich our client and have long-term success for them, not you primarily. So some buyers are egomaniacs and they're very repulsed by those comments. Others look at it and go, I'm getting a well-prepared seller. I'm understanding what I'm buying. So what if I pay an extra 10 or 15 or $20 million? The chances of my success have gone through the roof. I have a plan. I understand, and my client, the person they're buying, understands what levers need to be pulled to have success. So the smart buyers look at it and go, thank God Arc Malibu was there. And very few of them, we've been doing this for 30 years. I'm not thinking of a lot of our clients that the business has eventually failed, that it wasn't a good deal in the long run for both parties. And there could be some, I'm just not thinking of them. Most of them have great runs and are very successful because the foundation has been built, light has been shone, and they all understand what they're getting.
How do you go about, if you come in and you partner with someone who's trying to sell their business or have an exit, and say they have, like your father, 3 out of the 4 pillars, and maybe they don't have the culture that's required for them to be, almost a de-risked investment. How do you go about changing culture so late in an organization when they're looking to sell?
Part of it, DJ, is we simply try to shine light on it. And we communicate to them, this is what it currently looks like. These are some suggested changes. And this is why it will impact you. Sometimes it's having our senior advisors walk alongside the client and point out to them, if you make an effort to no longer have anyone in your company speak negatively about your clients and your other employees, the confidence and the belief amongst each other that we are for you goes through the roof. But when you're backbiting, gossiping, and speaking negatively, what my parents taught me was, if they're saying that about someone else to you, what are they saying to someone else about you? So it doesn't help. And our senior advisors walk through the teams, the leadership, and say, here are some things you should be considering changing. In some instances, DJ and Ivan, we'll recommend outside consultants. Whether that's someone like Transform Lead or Teamalytics, the former Flippin Group, where they're doing foundational work on identifying to you through their tools, do you trust? Do you believe? Are you desiring? Are you hopeful? The stuff that Transform Lead for Taylor's organization does on on helping set a vision, helping them set why they want to be doing what they're hoping to accomplish, setting the foundation so everyone understands the strategy. It doesn't happen every deal. It probably doesn't happen half of our deals, because when quite often someone comes to us, they're wanting to be out within 6 to 12 months. And consulting is not painless or quick. Occasionally, they're up for the analysis, they're up for the hard work, and the organizations quite often are transformed.
To piggyback off that, you mentioned a big piece of positioning your company well to exit is actually communicating that culture, because you can have the culture, but then you need to be able to communicate it to a buyer and have it be synergistic with, what that buyer is looking for. How do you go about communicating culture, and could you give like a story or an example of a time where you positioned the culture really well and it impacted, maybe the overall volume that transaction, or, the exit price of that transaction?
So the communication of it is not just writing it down, it's living it and having your actions repeat it. So, two parts of our culture, the only two items on our values, so what you get fired for at Arc Malibu, are integrity and confidentiality. Seems pretty simple, but you have to repeat it over and over and give examples. And we have to make sure that everyone understands, if you tell your wife about a deal that we're working on and she mentions it to her hairdresser, and her hairdresser cuts the hair of a potential buyer, it can be disastrous. And people don't think just mentioning something as simple as a project that your husband's working on to your hairdresser means anything. So to protect the innocent, although they should be shouting from the rooftop, one of our clients, we met, and really great guys, deep, active faith. They had a great company, but they didn't understand, or were not applying their understanding against certain segments of their business. Specifically, they weren't expanding as abundantly as they could, because they historically hadn't taken on almost any debt. So the concept of taking on a bunch of debt and expanding was anathema to them. But we broke down the numbers alongside them and helped them understand that if they did these certain things for growth and investment, because they had so little debt, they probably didn't need to write a check. The bank would lend them 100% to be able to do the growth. And because they were successful and had 8 figures of profit, they probably didn't have to have personal guarantees. So it wasn't risk-free, but it was a lot less risky. And when we helped build that picture for them, we weren't saying theoretically, here's 3 things you need to do. We spent 200 hours analyzing the financials and the areas that they should grow. And we interviewed competition, and we interviewed other people in the marketplace. And we came back and said, if you do these things, it's going to be impactful. And the value of their business almost doubled because they weren't just a great company anymore. They are a great company that was growing. They were a great company that was proving that if you invested another $100 million into them, it would probably throw off $200 million in profit in the next few years.
Wow. From what you're saying and what you implemented with this company and what you're looking at when helping a business, I mean, you listed off culture, values, habits, and then you got into operations, financials, etc. What I'm kind of seeing the pattern of you're attacking the root of the business rather than the fruit, which ends up being the financials, et cetera, and the valuation of it. And you're attacking the root of, it's like you're wanting to heal the root of the actual business owner, of the actual people involved in the company, of it's almost like you're trying to transform, or you are transforming the people themselves in order to make the business more valuable. And I know you have a very strong faith, and I know that plays into that. I'd love to see the connections or draw the connections out for the audience that your faith plays into how you go about doing business and how you go into helping your partners transform themselves. That then leads to the story that you just said, doubling your business's valuation and what you're able to sell for.
So several things within that, Ivan. One, God is gracious, and God woos each of us every day. And we have the opportunity to embrace that or reject it. And 20 plus years ago, two of my mentors, Ford Taylor and Nathan Estruth, both said to me, I love your heart for evangelism, but you can be obnoxious and you don't read the room. You're committed to saying Jesus. And just like the little kid that is asked by his Sunday school teacher, what is brown and has long hair and a long tail and runs around the park and loves eating squirrels? And his answer is, well, I think it's a squirrel, but I know the answer because we're in Sunday school, is Jesus. So it's making sure that we're listening to the maker of the universe, and we're hearing and responding, and we're loving people by our actions, by sharing good things with them, by celebrating them, and not just saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Praying for them, remembering, making notes, so that when you're analyzing the opportunity, you're hearing God whisper, how about this? Have you asked this person? I think I already mentioned to you, I was visiting with my wife this morning, and she was reminding me that Peter needs to slow down and actually ask. So we had a project, and the project was a concrete project, and we ended up going with someone we'd never met before. And I know of 4 people well. One of them runs two of them run billion-dollar concrete companies. I didn't call either one of them and say, who's a small concrete guy that might have used to work with you that might be able to help us on this project? Because I didn't slow down. All I was thinking was the exact thing we needed, and I didn't know anyone on the exact thing we needed. But if I connected the dots of who in my sphere of influence could help us think this through. So people oftentimes go, I can't believe what a connector you are, Peter. And I can't believe that you were able to get me to talk to that person and it was game-changing. And most of the time, it's just the fact that I may call either one of you guys in the next 3 days and say, you mentioned this, and I've got a friend that needs to accomplish this. Can you help? And almost everyone wants to help. Now, if one of you is close friends with President Trump, and I've never helped you on anything, and all of a sudden I call and I say, I need to talk to Trump, you're going to go, I don't think so. But I have been seeding banks of graciousness and help because the King of Kings says to do that for 61 years. So I had a situation where I needed help on a project for a great guy that I like a lot down in Texas. And I wasn't thinking very clearly because a guy that I know pretty well, I've prayed with him 30 or 40 times, is the president of a billion-dollar company in this guy's space. And until someone reminded me of that, I didn't reach out to my friend and say, can we talk? And within 48 hours, we were on the phone. Again, the answer of applying our faith into our business isn't saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It's slowing down, it's praying, it's being available, and living a life that God asks us to live. One of my mentors is a guy by the name of Tom Dewey. He had a heart attack when he was 48, sold his public company that he was the chairman of, but he controlled, and retired. And he has been giving back and mentoring and meeting with people like me for 30 years. And he said to me in the late 90s, early 2000s, I read a psalm and a proverb every day because Billy Graham reads a proverb every day and 5 psalms. And I can at least read one of each every day. And almost every day for over 20 years, I've read a psalm and a proverb. And Psalm 112 screams to me, invest in your family, invest in your kids, and they will reap a reward. It talks about graciousness. It talks about fierceness. I was reading in Proverbs 7, and light shines on our lives when we read the Psalms and the Proverbs. And we're not a religious freak when we're talking about an ancient Jewish writing that has impacted people for 5,000 years.
Yeah, it is the foundational text. The guy that I worked for 4 years, he always said that if I'm gonna go get advice on a specific problem that I have in business, or I'm dealing with something and I want to figure something out. Should I rely on someone that's been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? Or should I go back to the best-selling book and most impactful book of all time? And when he said that, it took me a while to actually take it to heart and start implementing. But when you start implementing that, and when you start, it's like you're processing. You both have your business here, and you have what you're reading here, and you're like connecting the dots. Is there a specific connection that you made that really sticks out to you that was transformational in your business?
The concept, gentlemen, of strengthening your mind. So strengthening your mind is described in the New Testament, in Proverbs, Psalms, all throughout the Old Testament. I bet 200 or 300 times. When I am not operating mentally at a high level, I'm not able to give my best to my family, to my company, to my clients, to my friends. When I have taken the time to bury God's word within me, when I've taken the time to read, when I've taken the time to remember what John Wooden has said, or what Abe Lincoln has said, or John Pepper, or other great modern thinkers, leaders, then I'm making that connection for eternity and for the here and now. I don't know if you recognize the name John Pepper, because you guys are both relatively young. He was the chairman twice of Procter & Gamble. And there was no reason. I wasn't a Procter & Gamble alum, but Procter & Gamble's based in Cincinnati. John Pepper has always been nice to me. I would see him at an event, I would approach him, I would extend my hand and remind him who I am. And he would laugh and say, "Peter, I know who you are." The simplicity of kindness. So this is a guy that ran profitably one of the premier CPG entities ever, twice. And he was also the chairman of Disney. And he was kind. He was fiercely loyal. He got his hands dirty by being in people's lives. He is an example of love and grace and Christ personified.
Where did this Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was gonna ask you, where did this faith, like, originate from? Because we've had a lot of people on the show, and there's a common thread between, honestly, some of the most successful people we've had. Like, the higher up they are, the more this faith is kind of embedded in the way that they operate, and they all have some moment or story, or maybe it was from their childhood, where they really started to take it serious. And I didn't mean to cut you off. If you had to finish that point, go ahead, but I'd love to hear where it originated for you.
So the earliest memory that I have, DJ, is of my mom on her knees praying for me and my siblings and my dad. If you had known me as a young child, you would have said my mom hadn't prayed enough. I was wild personified. My teachers that were, and this is obviously my bias, that were gifted and experienced, they would look at me and go, that is one smart kid. Let's channel him rather than discipline him. So my mom graciously prayed for me every day, countless times a day. And my older sister, Teresa, came to faith in Jesus Christ through a non-denominational outreach to high school kids called Young Life. So I was exposed to Young Life in the mid-70s. And it was something that was comfortable, and it was something that was attractive, and a lot of fun people went to it. And it drew me in. So I was the captain of the wrestling team, captain of my hockey team, captain of my football team. And I invited a bunch of guys to go to a Young Life weekend. And it was up at Whistler. And the weekend got washed out because of a bridge being washed out. So me and 3 of the guys went bar hopping at 16 in Squamish, halfway up to Whistler. So I invited them to a faith-filled, Christ-centered weekend. Instead, we went bar hopping. And at the end of the weekend, I sensed implicitly, God said to me, so how did that go? Did you accomplish what you wanted? And I was like, no, I don't think I accomplished what I wanted. No one got any more clarity on Jesus and intimacy and faith. As a matter of fact, everyone got smashed. So God keeps whispering to me, and he says, so you have a concept of salvation, and you also have a call to intimacy, to relationship, to lordship, where it's not theoretical, it's not saving from hell. It's a heart connection. It's having his arms put around me in the midst of disaster, in the midst of celebration, of I'm with you. So in February of 81, I said to God, okay, I'm not just going to do this fire escape thing. I'm going to do lordship. I'm going to do relationship. I'm going to do intimacy. By God's grace, I had several people, Maury Musgrove, Pete Prentice, other people that took the time to invest in me. One of the great families in building and construction in British Columbia is the Bentall family. And my dad always talked about Mr. Bentall. Everything was done on a handshake. Everything was done on respect. And one of his children was Chuck. And Chuck left the business world early and was the president of Young Life Canada. And again, just like John Pepper, Mr. Bentall had no reason to be nice to me. I might have mentioned to him that our dads had done business together, but he was just nice to me. And he taught me by his actions that relationships matter. He taught me by his actions that lordship, surrender, sacrifice is a positive thing. So I've been blessed with tons of awesome people in my life. One of them, Dennis Beausejour. He was the head of marketing globally for Procter & Gamble, was on the cover of Ad Age 2 years in a row, controlled a multi-billion-dollar spend budget. And again, no real reason that Dennis decided to invest in me, but he did, and we're great friends. It's trying to pass on to other people what God has graced me with, which is relationships, which is prayer, which is taking the time to understand that everyone has a story. And when we get too big for our britches and think someone's story is not a good story, not everyone's going to rub us right. Not everyone's going to interest us, but always being respectful and rarely speaking poorly of others are great foundational things.
And that ties back to everything that you were discussing earlier of in your younger years, seeing these leaders in business be kind to you, pour into you, invest in you, even when they didn't have to, with their root also being their faith. And you talked about it. You said over the last 40, 60 years or however long it's been, you've been planting seeds and planting seeds and planting seeds, and the exponential, I don't want to use the word return, but like the serendipity that you get off of that, the connections that you would have never seen possible that end up turning into these deals that you're doing. It all starts with that. It all starts with pouring into the real people, even though you may not be interested in necessarily what they're doing. It all starts with building the relationship. And like you said, the lordship that you embraced, it starts with surrendering to, I guess, being more like Christ and pouring into people has led to the opportunities that you've been able to experience, the deals that you've been able to express. Did I articulate that well?
Yes,
Hopefully.
absolutely. Very well stated, Ivan. It's the proverb that talks, you reap what you sow. So I led a Bible study for young men at Mars Hill Academy in Cincinnati, Ohio for 8 years. And Proverb 7, all of them will remember over and over and over me talking about Proverb 7. And this is a small, classical Christian school. And I would just remind them that the Proverbs address what's going on 5,000 years ago and today. So Proverbs 7, my son, keep my words and treasure my commandments within you. Keep my commandments and live, and my teaching is the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your intimate friend, that they may keep you from an adulteress, from the foreigner who flatters with her words. And then it talks about a young man that is indiscreet and naive, lacking sense, passing through the streets near the adulteress's house. And she woos him in. So every young guy in that group heard me talking about drop dead, gorgeous babes. And not every drop dead, gorgeous babe is an adulteress, but some are. And they would look at me like, one, Mr. Kubasek, no one speaks like this at this school. Two, we don't believe you. And I'd go, you guys know, and I would give them a name of one of their classmates' older brothers. And I'd say, he's 5 years older than you. He has a kid out of wedlock. He smokes dope constantly. and runs, as an assistant manager, a pizza place. He was in this Bible study 6 years ago. And they go, oh, well, that's not very convenient or helpful that you can point out a specific guy that fell to a drop-dead gorgeous babe. It's not rocket science. It's applying the word and making sure it's in front of us and having enough people in our lives that say, you're being a hypocrite. Are you applying what you're saying you're applying? And I am definitely not perfect. I still lose my temper. I still lust. I still am very human. But I have an awesome wife that I love dearly, that I've been married to for 40 years. And I'm faithful. Part of the reason I'm faithful is I plan ahead. I don't put myself in terrible situations. Now, some people would say every day of my life is a terrible situation because I'm an investment banker. And there's more money and greed and power and wealth than most people would ever see. But for the most part, by God's grace, I'm blessed to be able to walk.
That's so powerful, because people that would click on a show like ours, Deal Flow Show, talking to these business men, and I'll catch myself as well as, we started off this conversation asking you about the tactics, asking you about the operations, the go-to-market, and the financials. But I see that really is just the fruit of this root that we've been talking about for the last 20 or so minutes. And it's just so powerful to hear how that started and how that's manifested itself in your life over time. How with all the business you've done, with all the people you've helped, with all the relationships you've built, if you were to sum it up to a sentence, what would you hope that sentence would be that people would remember Peter Kubasek as?
He loved us and he lifted us up. I would think that my sons, my wife laughs quite often, I have destroyed their understanding and how hard it is to accomplish some things, because they call me at 2:41 and by 2:43 it's solved, because I love them and I want them, just like my dad, my mom, and my Uncle Bill, John Pepper, Dennis Beausejour, the Bentals. They bent over and they pulled me out. And it's not up by your bootstraps, the American way. It's by God's grace. It's His foundation. I don't love them in my own strength. I love them in Christ's strength. I don't lift them up because I'm powerful. I lift them up because the King wants them lifted up.
That's powerful. I just want to say thank you for today. This conversation was impactful.
Wow. Thank you for the good questions. Thank you for your prep. Thank you for your graciousness for approaching me. Hopefully, by God's grace, this lands well with people. And they don't go, hey, I know him. He's a turd. Because I'm an investment banker. I've pissed off a lot of people in my life.
Well, I think this conversation painted a different side. And Peter, if someone wants to find you, get in contact, reach out, has questions, where can they find you?
Peter K at ARK Malibu, MALIBU.com. They can go to the website. They can email me. I just got back from Miami late yesterday. I'll be in Texas most of next week, so I'm on the road a lot. But if I don't respond, email me again. Someone I just discovered almost 60 days after a friend's son emailed me that I didn't respond to his email. And that was so sad for me. So whether you know me or not, whether your dad knows me or not, I will try to respond. Might not be helpful, but I'll try.
I doubt that after today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's another episode of the Deal Flow Show with our good friend Peter Kubasek.